So we'll wait for another 2 minutes while our simultaneous interpreters are arriving. Good afternoon. We start. This is the press conference of the International Election Observation Mission to present joint preliminary findings and conclusions of the presidential elections held yesterday. My name is Irina Savashuk. I am head of administration of election observation of the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly, and I will be moderating this press conference. The statement of preliminary findings and solutions will be delivered by Guillermo Picchi, Special Coordinator and Leader of the Short-Term OSCE Observer Mission, followed by Gorgos Varimenos, Head of the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly Delegation, followed by Laima Andrikiene, Head of Delegation of the European Parliament, and Ambassador Geert Hinrik Erens, Head of the OSCE ODIHR Limited Election Observation Mission. The panelists will present their statements, and that will be followed by question-answer sessions open for journalists only. So, Mr. Piquet, we start.
Thank you, Irina. Thank you all for coming here. I'm pleased to present our preliminary conclusion on yesterday's presidential elections. This election was competitive and well organizing, featuring a short yet fierce campaign. The freedoms of assembly and expression were generally respected. The protracted resolution of complaints, as well as pending court cases, led to uncertainty regarding candidacies. Media coverage was extensive but devoid of analytical reporting. The election administration was effective despite the perception of partisanship in the appointment of mid-level election commissions. In the polling stations our teams visited, voting and counting were orderly, but transparency was somewhat limited by the GC releasing only aggregated results of the elections. In my time here in Mongolia this past week, I have clearly seen the will to conduct good elections, and yesterday we could see the result of this overall will. 3 candidates ran in what turned out to be a dynamic and at times even harsh campaign. However, we faced a very odd situation. Overly long deadlines for deciding on election-related complaints compromise the right to effectively legal remedy, which resulted in ongoing litigation and confusion regarding candidates. The end result is that up to and on election day, it was unclear if we would have 2 or 3 candidates. As a politician, which I am, having run in many elections, I see this as a real problem. But for the voters, it leaves real questions unanswered about their choice, and these must be addressed. That being said, it is overall a good sign that these were truly open elections, with the result very much in doubt right up until the last votes were counted. We understand that the second round of the election will be held to decide between the 2 leading candidates. We expect continued efforts by the authorities and hope for continuing engagement by the candidates and the public to ensure that this will bring a good conclusion to these elections. Mongolia needs clarity moving forward. We were here as a show of solidarity with the Mongolian people, and I hope that our work has helped to add an extra layer of transparency to the electoral process. In the end, we are here to support Mongolians in whatever choice they may make. To sum up and repeat clearly my message, these were competitive and well-run elections and are overall promising for the future of Mongolia's democracy. Pending court cases related to candidacies cause confusion and doubt, and these must be addressed because, to put it very plainly, voters must know if the candidates they are voting for on election day will be legally allowed to take office. I look forward for the second round, confirming this overall positive experience. Thank you all for the attention, and after colleagues from my colleagues, I will be happy to answer any question you may have. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I give the floor to Mr. Gorgos Varimenos, head of the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly delegation. Please.
Ladies and gentlemen, I want first of all to thank for being here to observe the presidential election after the invitation of the Mongolian government. I agree with what my colleague Guillermo Pitti has said, and allow me to add some additional comments on behalf of the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly. Our delegation included 22 delegates, including 16 members of parliament from across the OSCE region. As elected representatives, we parliamentarians have a personal interest in ensuring that elections are genuine and that their outcome is legitimate. Thanks to our intimate experience in setting up and competing in elections, our participation brings context and insight into the process of observing elections. Observers of my delegation were impressed yesterday, and I believe many European politicians would be envious of how technologies were put to good use in polling stations, enabling Mongolians to freely choose their next president. Many safeguards were put in place to ensure a smooth election day process. The introduction of ballot secrecy slips was a welcome initiative, yet not always understood. Given the scope of information available on the voters and voting process at each polling station, we were disappointed to see that the General Election Commission released only summary results. It should have been possible to display them down to the polling station level, which would permit independent scrutiny. We were pleased to see that party observers were widely present at polling stations and could access the polling, counting, and tabulation of the results. The General Election Commission made an effort to provide a meaningful opportunity for people with disabilities to exercise their political rights. We welcome the fact that 2 candidates included issues related to persons with disabilities in their platforms. However, despite the efforts by the election administration to facilitate their voting, many polling stations visited remained inaccessible to voters with limited mobility. We encourage all the relevant stakeholders to take note of these issues and to carry on with their efforts to improve elections through concerted reform, training, and voter education. Thanks again to all of those who warmly welcomed us in polling station yesterday. And I wish to say to Mongolians to have an even better performance, not only in the future, but even in the second round, regarding not only the election day, but the pre-election environment and the context. Thank you again.
Thank you. Now I give the floor to Ms. Laima Andrikiene, head of the delegation of the European Parliament. Please.
Thank you, Irina. Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, I am Laima Andrikiene, Chair of the European Parliament Election Observation Delegation, and also Vice President of our Standing Delegation for Relations with Central Asia and Mongolia. And it is my pleasure to have this opportunity to speak to you today. I would like first and foremost to thank you for your hospitality, which brings back good memories, as I also had the honor to lead our delegation in 2016 to observe at the time your parliamentary elections. Let me also express gratitude to the Mongolian authorities for their invitation to observe these elections. I am particularly pleased as this reinforces the excellent atmosphere of EU-Mongolia relations. The European Parliament, the only directly elected body of the European Union, represents 500 million European citizens and is committed to strengthen democracy all over the world. Election observation is one of our key foreign policy instruments in this process. Prior to election day, we met in Ulaanbaatar with your foreign minister, members of the state Hural, the election authorities, political parties, media, and civil society, and of course with our ambassadors. In these meetings, we familiarized ourselves with the situation ahead of the elections. On election day, we observed voting in various polling stations across the country, from the opening to the closing of activities, as well as the vote count. We divided into 3 teams deployed in Ulaanbaatar, in Zunmod, and in Darkhan, visiting both urban and rural areas. At the polling station I observed in Ulaanbaatar, I had the pleasure to see President Eldagdorj perform his civic duties like fellow Mongolian citizens. I pay tribute to his leadership over his past 2 mandates, and to him guaranteeing the respect of the Constitution during his tenure. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to make some specific remarks. As a delegation, we were integrated within the framework of an international election observation mission. I would like to thank my colleagues from the OSCE ODIHR and from the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly for our excellent cooperation during the mission. The European Parliament delegation fully supports and endorses the preliminary findings and conclusions of the observer mission. We were pleased to see that voting took place in a calm and peaceful manner. I think we can say that this was genuinely competitive contest, with no certainty as to which candidate was going to win. On the other hand, we regret that campaign finance regulations on transparency and accountability did not address in a timely manner concerns of corruption in political life. The candidates in their campaigns also failed to tackle this issue convincingly for the electorate, especially the youth. Adding to what colleagues said, having a pending court case against a candidate on D-Day led to uncertainty, undermining confidence in the electoral process. Compared to the last presidential elections, no women ran for office. Female polling workers outnumbered men in all polling stations visited. We look forward to active participation of women becoming the case in Mongolian public and political life in general. I would also like to recall previous OSCE ODIHR recommendations on the limitations imposed to the candidates to the presidency, who can only be proposed by parties represented in the Great Hural. In my view, such obstacles did not help the average voter, and in particular the youth, in truly identifying and engaging in this contest. In this context, we look forward to the final OSCE ODIHR report and the recommendations it will contain. The European Parliament attaches great significance to these recommendations and will pay full attention to their implementation. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to take this opportunity to emphasize that the European Union places great importance on its partnership with Mongolia, based on our joint respect for our common values of human rights and democracy. As the European Parliament fully supports this approach, we ratified this February with a resounding majority the EU-Mongolia Partnership and Cooperation Agreement, which will ensure even closer relations between us. We also welcome Mongolia's sincere willingness to engage under the EU Special Incentive for Sustainable Development and Good Governance, GSP+, and encourage you to pursue related reforms, which can only further entrench democracy consolidation for the benefit of the people of Mongolia. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you. Now I give the floor to Ambassador Geert Hinrich Arends, head of the OSCE ODIHR Limited Election Observation Mission. Ambassador, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen from the media. The OSCE ODIHR Limited Election Observation Mission, of which I am the head, has been in Mongolia for more than 5 weeks. We have been received here very friendly, and I want to express our heartfelt thanks to all our Mongolian interlocutors. My thanks go in particular to the Mongolian colleagues who work with us in our mission, and without whom we would not have been able to do our job properly. During our stay, we had good relations and contacts with all 3 candidates, parties, and campaign structures, and I was personally received by 2 of the 3 candidates. We found the election administration, from the General Election Commission down to the precinct election commissions on election day, quite cooperative. Last but not least, I want to express my thanks to the government that has invited us, and to the state structures with whom we have also had generally fruitful relations. An observation mission like ours is a general experience for all OSCE participating states who mutually enhance the democratic development based on the assessments and recommendations of ODIHR and its internationally composed teams. These missions are only observers that must not interfere in the elections, and they have to be neutral, since the election result belongs to the people of the host country, not to them alone. I think that the Mongolian people had, in this first round of the presidential elections, the possibility to express their choice in a genuinely democratic election, although there were a number of shortcomings, as contained in our preliminary statement, the press release, and the statements of the 3 parliamentarians that you have just heard, and which I do not need to repeat here. We all agreed on these points. Let me just say that the campaign indeed contained some very nasty moments, and that the confusion about deregistration or not of presidential candidates was, or rather is, an element that gives rise to concern. Our mission will stay here after the 2nd round, and my colleagues from the IEOM and myself are looking forward to a further fruitful presence in this wonderful and democratic country. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you. Now we open the floor for the journalists. Please clearly state your name and media outlet you represent. Any questions? Any questions in the audience? Yes, please.
Nick Edwards, Bloomberg Television. Ambassador, thank you very much for your comments. You used the phrase just said, very nasty moments during the campaigning. Can you give any specifics of which has led you to use such strong language there?
Well, there were certain videos which were really very bad. I don't know the title you know. And there were accusations by the 3 candidates of the other 2 candidates of corruption, other criminal acts. And we ask ourselves sometimes what impression that makes on the ordinary citizen who is called to vote in an election.
Thank you. Any other questions? No question? Yes, please.
Hello, my name is Irnatr. I'm from a website called Live. So like 5 or 6 days ago, there was this presidential debate. And how do you think it affected the results of the election?
Mr. Vicky?
Well, presidential debates are always useful to create awareness in the voters and to take more information, have broader view on the platforms and on the candidates. So we always welcome when there are such events. It's not in our competence to assess whether it influences the vote in one direction or the other. We deem positive to have such debates, always useful to raise the awareness in the Mongolian voters. So positive fact, but whatever direction it went, it was up to the voters to decide then in which way to vote.
Thank you. More questions? Please.
Terry Edwards from Thomson Reuters. Every year there's always some talk of people trying to buy votes, give gifts for votes. Was anything of this manner observed at any point?
I mean, in our talks with the campaign headquarters of the candidates, we heard accusations that this would happen during election day. Now, it's one of our principles that we can only report on things that we have witnessed ourselves. And I'm not aware of any such instance. It does not mean that it has not happened because the rumors were rather massive.
Thank you.
Thank you. Questions? If no questions, then we will close the press conference. I would like to inform you that the paper copies of the press release and preliminary statement and conclusions are available outside this room. Thank you and goodbye.
Gianni, ci fai la foto? All of us in front of European Parliament.
Front of.
This is a bit written on the other side.
Is this anybody's telephone?